And so we're continuing our Black History Month celebration of women who have pushed us forward. And Sunny has it today.
Thank you, Whoopi. Today we honor investigative journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones, who continues to redefine our national conversations on race. Jones, the New York Times in 2015, and published her groundbreaking investigative piece 4 years later, The 1619 Project. The collection of essays and art backdated the founding of the United States from 1776 to 1619, the year when the first enslaved Africans arrived in Virginia.
We're going to really get into Miss Pennywise, because nothing that should not represent, at least in my opinion, should not represent Black History Month. She's actually been the total opposite to not only Black history, which she fabricates and lies about, but American history. Because The View continues their Marxism advocacy with their latest segment honoring Nikole Hannah-Jones for Black history. So first off, she is a divisive figure who basically was she was the numero uno before of money grifters. And she's clashed in academic circles. She's accused of rewriting history to push a left-wing agenda in education and media. What are your thoughts on her, Shelley?
I think she looked like a clown. That's what we were talking about. But that, whatever her outfit. Nevertheless, look, the only thing I will say for maybe positive about Nikole Hannah-Jones is that I can, to a degree, understand her advocacy of history as a historian, as an investigative journalist. However, she distorts it a lot. She distorts it. I don't have
a historian if you're lying.
Well, I don't have a problem with people teaching students about history. Even in the year 1619, when the first Blacks were brought to the shores of what was known, what came to be known as the United States. That's one thing, but she distorts it. She misrepresents it. Not only that, this is where I think she also messes up big time, hugely, as they say in the celebrity world. She only focuses on the slavery, and she doesn't give the other balance about people who came out. Now, according to Jamal Bryant, we just runaway slaves. We should still be enslaved according to him, but she doesn't encourage students and quote unquote empower them to say, okay, this is history, but you don't have to be there. You are in the United States of America. You can achieve the American dream, whatever your little heart desires, if you will. But she doesn't do that. It's this slave mentality. It's this victim mentality. It's this entitlement mentality. It's this, the government owes you, Black people, if you will, Black students. This is what you need to do, and basically grift.
Nikole, so, I have to jump in here because first of all, she is not a historian, and she was not pushing anything about Black history that was true. She was pushing Marxist revisionism is what she was pushing. The 1619 Project, as she pushes it, saying that the United States was built on slavery and the whole founding was built on slavery, is a lie and has been debunked. She has been debunked. The whole thing has been debunked. She actually had to go back and retract it.
She did that. Yes.
Yeah. So she is a charlatan, in my opinion. Nikole, what's your thoughts?
So I want to say something positive about her, because my maiden name is Nikole Jones. So there's got to be some kind of little something, in there. And here's the thing: she took a lie and made profit on it. That's my positive moment. Okay. She made some change. She made some change, right? But here's the problem: in making that change, she set the movement back, 100 years. Because instead of saying, this is where we started and look at where we are, her focus is on staying where we started. Listen, American slavery was horrific. There's no debating that. It is what it is. It's a blight on our culture. It's a scar on our nation. Hear the word scar. We're not actively bleeding from slavery. We've healed, and there's some tissue. There's some tissue damage, right? But when you think about communities like Dorchester here in Maryland, where 50% of the people who lived there were Black and they were free,
right?
And a couple
Maryland's called the Free State.
A couple of them had some slaves. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. It was the culture of the day. It didn't make it right, but it is what it is. She took a little grain of history and made
yes.
millions.
Millions. She did?
Millions.
Millions.
But by that same token, she has infected the mind of children
Right.
with this victimhood card that makes them feel entitled to treat other people poorly because poor old me, my ancestors were a slave. Here's the truth. Those ancestors would slap the taste
Right.
slap the black off of you for doubling down on slavery instead of living like a free man.
Absolutely.
And they fought for freedom. I mean, they fought for freedom. Some people lost their lives fighting for freedom. And here we are today with freedom all around us, and people are still choosing to be dependent.
Right.
Still
All
choosing
because of
dependency.
this whole victim oppressed mentality, like you said. And I mean, as you mentioned, she made millions off of this grift. Her, Ibram X. Kennedy, all of them made millions off of this grift, and in viewing everything through the lens of slavery. So much so, she said tipping was racist.
Yeah, that was so funny.
Yeah, she posted a tweet and said tipping is a legacy of slavery, and if it's not optional, then it shouldn't be a tip, but simply included in the bill. She wrote, "Have you ever stopped to think why we tip? Like why tipping is a practice in the U.S. and almost nowhere else? The practice of tipping is straightforward: money in exchange for work or service. But its roots in America are where the story becomes complicated." So again, first of all, that's wrong. Tipping, you can look this up, started like in the 1800s. Wealthy Americans discovered it for themselves in the 1850s and 1860s, but it was originated in Europe. In taverns is where they tip. So again, this is history that she chooses to ignore and push a racial Marxist narrative.
She's perverting history.
Yeah,
That's what she does. She perverts the history to fit her particular narrative. Does that not sound familiar?
Oh,
hint, hint, the DNC. But this is what they do. America has woken up, though. You know, I hate to say that we woke, but guess what, folks? We woke. Here's the thing. She made so much money so quickly. She had to figure out how to continue the grift.
Exactly.
What's the new thing? I got to throw something else on the fire to keep the flames going.
So I had this book. I brought this book because we were talking about her, and I'm just starting it. But it's called Black Fortunes by Shamari Wills. And I'm thinking, has Nikole, what is her name? Hannah-Jones. Nikole Hannah-Jones. I wonder if she ever tells people, and these are modern people right now, the ones I'm going to mention: Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, a few other people. There were some Black millionaires in here. These were some of the first Black millionaires in America. I wonder if she ever tells her students about these types of people and how they came through slavery and overcame it and still became millionaires in the early 19th century. So I don't think she does that. That's what I mean about this victim. Slavery, unfortunately, slavery still sells, and it sells and pays off big to those who purport it and push it only from the victim narrative.
Yes.
They don't use it from a historical perspective. It's like you said, this is where we were and this is where we are. And this is how you can get from A to Z, doing many things in America, not just grifting people. Again, I'm still going to stick to, I don't fault her as an investigative journalist, as a historian in her own right. But she does use history in many ways, a perverted way, to use your word, Nikole. And she still uses it to keep young people's minds enslaved and entrapped. Again, according to Jamal Bryant, those who want to get away from the plantation, the runaway slaves, there's something wrong with that. And that's what Nikole Hannah-Jones pushes as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what she does. And not only doesn't she talk about the Blacks who own slaves, she does not mention where slavery began. We know in Africa, slavery was, of course, a grave moral evil. It was also common. It was common in the time. The United States indeed did tolerate slavery, and the Southern states fought for the continuation of slavery during the Civil War. But virtually all countries in human history who supported slavery during that time, including African countries, shipping Africans to the Americans in chains. But the first European country to ban import of slaves was Denmark in 1803. And then Britain outlawed it in 1807. And then the United States passed legislation banning slaves in 1808. So again, and then of course we all know we fought the Civil War where what was it? How many people died? 620,000 Americans died, nearly half the total number of Americans to die in all wars combined.
What we never also hear about is we never hear about the Arab slave trade, which was the biggest one. They traded slaves all over the known world. Yes. And truth be told, the Arab world, at least they're still enslaving people, right? Mm-hmm. But we never hear about that. And these are so-called, I guess they call brown people, right? Yes. But we never hear about that. Again, slavery was atrocious. Anywhere it has been practiced was atrocious. It is an evil. It is a human stain, not just an American stain. But again, you have people like Nikole Hannah-Jones, the Ibram Kendis, or however you pronounce his name, the Al Sharptons, all these people who use it for their own enrichment. But at the same time, they're not giving the whole picture. Mm-hmm. They're leaving parts out, and they are enslaving, quote unquote, the minds of the people that really hang on to their words. It's evil. That's all I'm going to say. It's evil.
I want to say this for people who are students of the U.S. Constitution. And I can tell you, take that Hillsdale class. It's for free, Constitution 101. And you will learn that the founders were scared to death to release the slaves because they said, well, wait a minute. They're bigger than us. They're stronger than us. Mm-hmm. There are more of them than there are of us. Thomas Jefferson literally said, we have the wolf by the ear and we're afraid to let him go. You know, they're afraid that there was going to be a revolt and stuff was going to go bad. And that's no excuse, right? But it does show you the mindset of the time. We can't judge history based on today's mores. We just cannot. It was an evil time. But if you read the Bible, if you read God's word, he talks about slaves in the Bible. Right. You know, men, the hearts of men is just a dark place.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And there's no going around that. But she profited off being myopic, that myopic view, just the victimhood. When you teach Black history, I do a Black history tour for some homeschool kids and anybody else who wants to go along here in Maryland. I talk about how slavery affected both sides of the equation, right? Because sometimes nobody had shoes. Nobody had shoes. The slave master didn't have no shoes. The slaves didn't. Nobody had shoes. Shoes were a luxury item, right? And we grew up together in this very new nation. We grew up together. And yes, there were some hard times, some evil times. Things are not working out to our advantage at some point, but we have still grown under God's blessing. And we're never going to be a perfect union. That's why it says that. A more perfect union, but not a perfect union.
I was going to say, just on the point that you made about the growing up together and things, you know, we also are told that this country was built on the backs of slavery, and that's the slaves. That's not necessarily true. The South really participated in slavery and had the most slaves, and economically they didn't do well. The economic fortune was in the North, with the industry and things like that. That's what built this country, not the South.
Do you know? I disagree with a little bit about that. As far as slaves, the country not being built on the backs of slaves, at least in the South. I disagree with a little bit. I know what you're saying. To a point, I disagree.
I'm just talking about economy. The economy of the South at the time.
The economy is South, but the economy, the wealth was held in the plantations and the slave owners.
No, most of the wealth South was held in the North.
No. There was northern wealth, but in the South, the plantation holders did have wealth.
They had some wealth, but when you look at the country on a whole, and you're looking at where the economic interests were,
and the slaves could not get free. They were fighting to get free to get to the North so they can participate in that economic wealth.
I'm not saying that was not the case. What I'm saying is most of the wealth during that time was not in the South. It was in the North.
But if you couldn't get there to get the wealth, then what difference did it make?
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is that when we look at the way the economic endings of the country, we're not flourishing, or we did not flourish because of the economy of the South. We flourished
as a whole country
of the economy of the North, most important. And the reason, and one of the biggest reasons why the Union won the war is because they had much more money than the South.
I get that.
And that's historically true.
So I would say that would be a macro point, but I'm going to say a more micro point would be that in the South, the plantation owners did have the wealth. They controlled it there. So that way they were keeping the people, the slaves, if you will, from achieving their economic opportunities. So I'm just saying. So I hear what you're saying. I would say from a macro and a micro perspective.
But most people did not own slaves.
No, I get that, but the ones that did, they still had the wealth. But this is the question I had, or a thought question. How is it any different from Nikole Hannah-Jones enslaving the minds of young people, particularly? Why is that not considered a form of slavery? She's enslaving their minds instead of saying, again, this is where we were. You are free now. You are free to achieve that. Why is that any less? Why is that not considered worse than, or at least equal on par with physically enslaving people? Mentally enslaving them versus physically enslaving them. I think there's some equality there, if you want to use that word equality. I think there's some correlation there. Yes. And I think in a sense, to a degree, I would hold Nikole Hannah-Jones a little bit more culpable because we are free. There's no slavery, but she's still enslaving the minds of people.
For her money, for the grant.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so, slavery hasn't been all about wealth. Slavery was not necessarily, I'm going to go out and enslave Black people because I hate them. It was about building wealth.
Right.
And you were both right? So the South grew agriculturally and the North sold it and they traded it with other people. So as a nation, we had issues. We had issues because we saw things differently.
What I was saying was the economy of the United States was not
the economic driver was the North. Absolutely.
Of the South. It was the North.
And that's always the way. The people who grow the fruit never make the good money. It's the people who sell the fruit that make the good money, right? Let's just keep that a buck. But you're right about enslaving the mind. And just from my personal estimation, enslaving the mind affects generations of people. Enslaving the body may affect one generation. And to continually feed children little dribbles that say, we were enslaved and we were treated poorly. It does something to their psyche, their value as human beings.
Right.
That some way they're defective because they were born with beautiful brown skin. And children don't come into the world that way. We teach them that.
Yes.
And that's what needs to change.
Yep.